What is the difference between a startup and a business? So let me begin with one of the important thing, which is startup has a failure rate of, now very popular stat which is available, that startup has a failure rate of 22%. On the other hand, the business has a failure rate of 32% in the 3 years of its existence. So, in a 3 years of its existence, a startup, 92% of the startups can fail. However, 32% of the businesses can fail. Now, that makes one of the popular figurative example about how the things are done, right? So these are the first two things that I'm going to talk about. Now I'm going to talk about what is the difference between the two, right? So first of all, that one important, like, I have a few parameters in which I'm going to talk about the differences, but let me begin with something like innovation. So innovation, okay. So, what I can say is that in terms of innovation, when it is about a startup, it is obviously considered to be something which is building an innovative product, which is testing an innovative business model, an innovative revenue model. On the other hand, when it comes to business, it is something which can be a standard business, it can be a bottle business, it can be a something else business, a business that your neighborhood person is also applying. So that doesn't make that the business is not big, but definitely the innovation factor is much high in startup but a little low in business. So the innovation is one amongst the first topics that we have covered in terms of the difference between startup and a business. Now we are going to move ahead and talk about the other factor, the difference between a startup and a business. So the second factor to talk about would be scopes. Okay. So when you're talking about scope, we know that a small business or a business is within established limits. So the scope of this business is going to be more towards the business person's personal networks, and can also be expanded a lot. But definitely there are limitations to the growth, and therefore the scope of a business is less. However, when it is the scope of a startup, the scope, which is the limitations to its growth, is much bigger in terms of startup. Now, the third thing that we are going to talk about in this term is going to be rate of growth. One way in which everyone talks about startup is that startups really grow fast, right? And that is a very important difference between a business and a startup, and this is actually one amongst the really important difference between a startup and a business. So when we are saying that there, what is the rate of growth that a startup shows, a startup is a really fast growing business in the shortest time possible, and that is why in order to produce this kind of growth, in order to produce this kind of business model, then a startup needs to actually raise a lot of fund, because internal money cannot be that fast. However, a business, though, since it is run with its own money, which is business and startup, so since businesses are run more towards their own money, therefore the rate of growth is a little bit low. And that is one of the reasons why a business, you'd see that it is being grown generation after generation. On the other hand, a startup, you'd come across the startup in maybe yesterday, and today you'd see that the startup has really grown and is coming in the newspaper and is coming out as a unicorn. So that is one of the reasons why there is a big difference when it is about the fourth thing, which is profit. So when it comes to profitability, definitely they both follow a different approach. When it is a business, the profit is a priority, and it is something that they are expected to grow in the first thing. So businesses have the pressure of creating a profit from the day one. On the other hand, when it is about a startup, it is considered that definitely the growth is a much important factor, and the profit could be something which would be dealt across in the later stages. Maybe you are acquiring the entire market share, and later on you would sell out a product, sell out a thing which would give you a lot of profit in the later stages. So therefore the profitability in the initial stages is something definitely that the business is going to be under more pressure towards. However, over a long term, the profit could be something that even a startup acquires at a very big scale. Now, the fifth point at which we are going to talk and compare both of them is finance. So, when it is about business, it is the personal money. It is the personal money of the businessman, of the business owner. On the other hand, when it is about startup, it can be external as well. Definitely, when it is about business, it can also be loan. which is a debt related instrument. On the other hand, when it is about the startup, it can again be a loan, it can be again be debentures or debts issued, but still it is again something more towards the external. Again, startup is also something which are initially funded by a founder himself or herself, but majorly the external funding is a major factor in a startup. And definitely, it is much easier for a startup to raise a fund if the startup model has been followed. So we are now going ahead with technology. When it comes to technology, a business may not be that technology intensive and that technologically driven. However, a startup is supposed to be growing really fast over a worldwide scenario, and therefore, in order to reach out to that worldwide expansion, technology does play an important role, and therefore, technology is much evident here. So, this is how we are in the comparison cycle, and we are coming across with the last thing, which is team and management. So, when it is about team and management, a business definitely grows a little slow in team and management. The team and the management is hired at a much later stages. On the other hand, when it is a startup, the team and management is really fast. The management people are hired even from the very beginning, and then the later management is grown and further things are done. So, team and management growth is much faster in a startup. However, the same is not true for a business. I hope that all this helps you understand what is the difference between a startup and a business. But just in case if someone asks you a quick description about what is the difference between a startup and a business, then you can definitely say that the growth rate at which they both grow. Rest all the things are just a contribution towards the same.